Hello, everybody. Hope everybody is doing fantastic out there tonight. And this is Corey Poirier. Really excited to be delivering the how to secure and how to deliver
This is
your
Corey
first
Poirier.
TEDx talk and or world-class TEDx talk. Just wanted to make sure we're running okay so I can watch what people are mentioning or asking. So we're here now. Like I say, we're officially live. And so I saw a comment there from Sandra about the YouTube video. So I did place a YouTube video up at first just so we could have something up there while we were waiting for the show to go live. So thank you, Sandra, for pointing that out so we could change the video to make sure people realize we were live. So thanks again, Sandra. And hopefully, Sandra, maybe you can let me know if you can see me okay, because I know you're online here. And if you want to just type a message and let me know for sure, and then we'll be ready to rock and roll, as they say. So while she's doing that, I know we're at least recording. So first of all, what I'm going to talk about tonight is how do you secure your TEDx talk and how do you deliver your TEDx talk? And why this is significant to me is because years ago, oh, perfect. Okay. So I guess Sandra commented that she can see stuff going on, I think, or that Zenicore is a very unusual name. So that's pretty cool. So sounds like we're live. And like I said, what I wanted to talk about tonight is how do you secure your first or your next world-class TEDx talk? And why this is significant to me is because I started out my journey as someone who was terrified of the idea of speaking on stage, probably like many of you that are watching right now and thinking, you know what, I'm not sure that I could deliver a TEDx talk, or I'm not sure if I could be on the stage, or I'm not sure if that's for me. So that's how I started my journey. I actually was terrified of the idea of speaking in public and on stage. In fact, my first talk I ever delivered, I turned multi shades of color. And in fact, I delivered the talk, and afterward, I said to people, what was it like? And they said, well, I don't know what you were talking about, but you were sure passionate in talking about it. And so I knew I was onto something, but at the same time, it tells you my level, where I delivered this talk and I don't even remember what I said. And so that's kind of where I was with my first talk. And how it started my journey, I share this often, but I think it's kind of important, is that I started actually on the stand-up stage. So what happened with me is that I was terrified of the idea of, like I say, speaking in public. I was terrified of the idea of being on stage. But what happened was I got invited to try my hand at the stand-up comedy workshop. It was a 2-week workshop. And the idea was we were going to learn how to jump onto a stage and deliver stand-up material. And so, you know, as they say, the number one fear in the world above public speaking is death. And so I've shared this many times, but what that means, according to Jerry Seinfeld, the comedian, is that if you were at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than doing the eulogy. So the idea of performing stand-up comedy on a stage wasn't really too exciting to me at the time. But I also felt if you're going to conquer fear, you need to face it head on. So what happened was I was invited to the stand-up comedy workshop, and I decided to take a chance and go to this workshop, knowing that it didn't mean I was ever going to have to get onto the stage. You know, you can go to a workshop, but that doesn't mean you're ever going to perform on the stage. And so I went to this comedy workshop thinking, at the very least, I'll take the workshop and then I'll decide later if I'm going to get on the stage. But what happened was our third week, we were going to be watching people entertain us, and we found out probably about 5 minutes to 8, so 5 minutes to showtime, that we were going to be the entertainers. We had no idea when we got there that we were going to be the people entertaining the audience. And so I had been to one Toastmasters meeting. So hopefully you know what Toastmasters is. It's an organization that helps people get over their fear of speaking in public. And so I'd been to one Toastmasters meeting, and what I learned was that if you're going to face a fear like speaking, you face it head on. So for me, what that meant was that I jumped up onto the stand-up stage, grabbed the mic, and I jumped into what I thought was the best joke that I ever told in my life, to dead silence. And then I jumped into the second best joke and more dead silence. So that was my start of my journey. And I actually bombed that night in comedy, and I continued to bomb night after night for the better part of a year and a half, 2 years. But I saw that there were things I liked about stand-up comedy. and there were things I didn't like. And so what happened was I saw a couple of speakers and realized that there were all kinds of things that I see I have a question here, so I'll jump to that in a second. But yeah, I saw there were all kinds of things in the world of comedy that I didn't like, and all kinds of things that I liked in the speaking world. But I saw that they were similar, so I slowly but surely began to make the transition into the speaking side of things and away from comedy. Now, saying that, I ended up performing stand up for about 9 years, roughly 700 shows. So I didn't leave it all together. And I learned probably more about the world of professional speaking from my time in stand up comedy than almost any other place in my life. However, I really transitioned into speaking as my core passion and focus. But I tell you that part of my journey because I want you to know this is possible for anybody. Again, you have somebody who was terrified of being on the stage, who bombed their first night being on the stage and didn't have the mic turned on. And then on top of all that, I had, as I mentioned, delivered my first public talk and didn't remember a word of what I said because I was so terrified. So that was my starting part of my journey. And then if I go a little bit backwards as well into my backstory, I barely graduated high school. My girlfriend doesn't like me sharing this very often, but one of my teachers gave me a 49 plus 1, and a 50 was a graduation. And he wanted me to know that he gave me the point to pass, that I didn't earn it. So that was my graduation year, grade 12. High school. So I can theoretically say I barely, and maybe you could even say I didn't, but I still got through and I got a certificate, but barely graduated high school. So when I hear people say I can't be a speaker because I don't have your talent or your history or your comfort with the stage or what have you, I just want you to know, based on my backstory, it didn't start that way. And I still go out there and I'm nervous regularly when I go onto the stage. But the big thing is, it's important to step outside your comfort zone and make it happen. And one of my TEDx talks is actually on that, the one I had up on the screen earlier. It's actually on stepping outside your comfort zone, and multiple times over and over, so that you can try to crush your goals. So that was a learned experience. So that's a bit of my backstory. I was also raised by a single mother, and that plays a really big part in my journey as well. But Bismita, and hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right, fingers crossed. But the question that you had posed was how to control this, Corey. Sometimes we think something and something else comes out of our mouth. Is there any rule of thumb? I'm asking this in general in any situation. So I'll answer the question this way. In my, for what I do and in my experience, I hate to say it because I know you'd love a better answer than this, but a lot of times it comes down to practice. So what you'll probably discover is that it takes time to get comfortable with what you're saying, whether it's in public, whether it's on the stage. That's why Toastmasters, which I mentioned, is a great place to go to get that comfort. You get in front of you go to a room where you might have 10 people speaking that day, doing icebreakers and doing mini presentations, and you can just watch until you're comfortable speaking. But what you learn there is you learn to get comfortable speaking on the fly, winging it, being able to think about what you're going to say maybe 30 seconds before you say it. And you'll notice sometimes I'll pause and I'll look in a different direction. That's me actually thinking about what I want to say before I actually say it. It'll get easier and you'll get more comfortable with it. As I mentioned, in the stand-up comedy world, I was thrown to sort of the wolves, and it took time, but eventually I got comfortable with it because of being in there. You're in it kind of to win it. So you either get comfortable with it, or you basically don't go back on the stage again. And so I learned to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So what I'll say is, first of all, it takes stepping outside your comfort zone, whether it's speaking in public and hoping not to put your foot in your mouth, or whether that's speaking on a stage. Secondly, I'll say you can go to a class or visit a program or a group like Toastmasters, and that'll get you more comfortable with it. The other side is practice. And so that could be practicing kind of being under stress situations and seeing how you deal with it, and seeing how you can think about what you want to say next. And so when I say that, one of the greatest comments I ever received was from a comic that I was interviewing. His name is Mark Littell. He's a Great Canadian Laugh-Off winner, and he was a troupe member in the troupe called Picnic Face and had a show on the Comedy Network. And I interviewed Mark, and I asked him, Mark, what do you think is the one thing the average person doesn't realize about stand-up comedy? And he paused, and then he said, I think people don't realize how much work goes into it to make it look like no work at all has gone into it. So that relates to the practice. The late Zig Ziglar, we had Tom, his son, on our speaking program show. So this is within our paid speaking program, and Tom is one of our experts. And I asked Tom about his father and being able to speak in front of millions of people and how he became such a great speaker. And he said that even though his father delivered the same presentation thousands of times, he still practiced an average of 3 hours to deliver that same talk he had already delivered many times before. So, Bismita, and again, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Hopefully that answers the question. What I would say is step outside your comfort zone, practice, and maybe go to a place like Toastmasters where you can get comfortable being uncomfortable. So, and pronouncing your name. So hopefully I pronounced it right. Awesome. Okay, so so that's, like I say, my backstory. That's the answer to that question. And I'm going to jump right into the meat of what I wanted to talk to you about today. What I will tell you as far as an agenda, originally I was planning to use PowerPoint, but then I thought that this way you get to see me talking, see the inflection, see my pauses, what have you, and at the same time, it's more. I'm going to say it's more on the fly. It's more organic. And I had a couple of people in the last couple of days tell me they love the organic side of things. So I thought that's the approach I would take for today. Always open to feedback, though, if you'd rather have PowerPoint. And at the same time, I actually can send you out a PowerPoint if you reach out to me and send me an email. I can send you a PowerPoint as well to go along with what I'm covering tonight. But you'll notice me look over to the right. I'm just taking a peek at my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. So, as I mentioned, what I'm going to talk about tonight, I guess we'll say without any further delay or ado, is I wanted to talk about how do you secure your first or your next TEDx talk. And then the secondary part is how do you deliver a world class or your first TEDx talk. So, as mentioned in my backstory, I have delivered multiple TEDx talks, so I've been down this road before, and that's one of the most common questions I get asked from speakers, emerging speakers, people who want to become speakers is how do you deliver a TEDx talk and how do you actually secure one? So the good news is I'm going to reveal both of those tonight, but I'm also going to be full disclosure and say when it comes to securing a TEDx talk, we've kind of systemized it. We built a system around how to do it, but there's also a lot of variables because there's people involved, there's different organizers involved. So what I'm going to share with you isn't any kind of steadfast rule. I'll also tell you it's not as maybe systemized or structured in general as other things that you may hear because again the world of securing a TEDx talk is not as systemized. You hear lots of people who've submitted multiple times, different talks, et cetera, and still haven't secured one yet. And then you hear of other people who just basically backward fell into one. So I'm going to share with you at least the process through my eyes. So the first part of it is you need to decide where you want to deliver your TEDx talk. Now, obviously, if somebody invites you to deliver a TEDx talk in an area that you're not based in, you may ultimately decide that you want to go to that area. And even though theoretically, and I haven't heard it happen yet, but TEDx doesn't pay speakers for their talk. Some of the conferences will actually pay for your travel and transportation, depending on how far you are and, of course, how much they want your talk as part of the event. So traveling somewhere else for the talk may make sense, and you might be speaking somewhere near where the talk's taking place at that timeline, or you can arrange to be there. So it may and might make sense. But the reason I say, first and foremost, start by looking and seeing where the TEDx talks near your area is because typically speaking, with a TEDx talk, you may have to go for an audition. You may have to visit with the organizers. And if that's the case, and you're going to have to go multiple times before you even know if you're going to be selected, you may want to try to avoid a lot of expenses and travel expenses and what have you. So choose one, if you can, that's near your area. You do that is you do searches. So you could do a Google search and put in TEDx. And if you're in Washington, maybe you put in Washington or you put in DC or Seattle or Toronto and you search the area. The other option is to go to the TED main website, and then you can also search upcoming TEDx talks and TED Talks, and you can search by geographical area. So first things first, you want to search where the TEDx talk is being held that's near you, and then that way at least you know what direction to look at. And then the next stage would be to go visit their website. So what you want to do when you go visit their website is you want to, of course, visit it, but you also want to research it. So you want to go, some websites will have a lot of detail for TEDx events, some won't. But what you want to do is you want to go and consume the website and get a feel for who's spoken there in the past at their event. You want to see who, what type of speakers they bring in. In a perfect world, you want to see what their theme is for the upcoming year. Now, I will tell you, sometimes the challenge is they don't announce the theme until after they've already accepted submissions. So, but in a perfect world, you'll be able to see what theme they're practicing towards. Or you can go to previous themes and see what kind of themes they typically seem to have an appetite for, if you will. So you really want to get familiar with that TEDx website for the area that you think that you may want to speak at. So again, ideally a place near you geographically or where you're going to be. So go visit their website. You want to research their website. And again, determine if there's a theme. And then the next part is, so this is a key thing. So before, whenever I started, you couldn't actually you couldn't nominate yourself. So when I did my first TEDx talk, you had to be nominated by somebody else. The great news is now, for the most part, most TEDx events and even the main TED Talk, you can actually submit and nominate yourself. So once you went to the website, you decided which area you wanted to speak at for TEDx, you went to the website and did your research, you found out what kind of talks and speakers they normally bring in. Then the next stage is you're probably going to want to nominate yourself or get somebody to nominate you. If you're going to get somebody to nominate you, make sure they know you really well, because they're going to ask a lot of questions that you have to know the person quite well, which is kind of ironic considering that somebody could be nominating you just because they saw you speak somewhere and loved your talk. But the point is that you can nominate yourself for the most part, or somebody else can nominate you. And so that's, of course, the next stage, is to go through the process. Once you've done enough research and you feel comfortable, go through the process to nominate yourself. And here's the big kicker is, and this is especially if you don't know the theme, but even if you do know the theme, what you want to do, based on my experience with TEDx talks, they really like bringing in unique people, talk, but it's a talk that people universally can either relate to, emotionally connect with, or have experience in. Something that connects with people on an emotional and storytelling level, but is also very unique. So they want to deliver something that hasn't been seen before or hasn't been seen often, but at the same time, they want it to be universal and not so far out there that nobody can sort of relate to it. So again, it gets challenging if you don't know what the theme is, but what I'm suggesting is that if you're going to have to sort of pick a talk based on not knowing their theme, then what I would do is try again to make sure your talk is universal enough that they can see how people can relate to it, but also make it unique enough that they say, we need to bring this person in. And also, if you don't know the theme, try to make it so that it's something that can adapt to multiple themes. And if you do know the theme, then obviously try to cater to that theme. So that's the submission process. And then the key thing is you want to have an idea worth sharing. That's the TED motto, is have ideas worth sharing or spreading. And so you want to make sure that that's the type of idea you have. And by the way, if you want to test this and you're comfortable doing it, pitch it to other people. Pitch it to people see how it resonates with them, see if they say, wow, that I could totally see that as a TED Talk or a TEDx talk. If you're even more comfortable, you may not, because you may want to keep your idea to yourself, but if you're more comfortable, go on social media. Do a survey, get people to go to a survey and let you know if this talk resonates with them. And if 95% say it resonates with them, but they also haven't heard it before, you obviously know you're onto something. So again, do a lot of work on the front end, because once you submit your nomination or your application, then it's kind of a wait and see. And at that point, like I said, they could bring you in for an audition. In my experience, it's okay to follow up to see how things are coming along. Most TEDx events are really good at telling you when they'll notify people. And so bear in mind, they're going to get probably hundreds of applications, and they're going to select maybe 7 or 8 applications for speakers. So have some patience. Don't crush yourself worrying over whether or not you were selected. Just know there's future years you can apply for it. There are probably other TEDx talks close enough that you could apply for those. But send it in, do your best job on the front end, and then, like I said, then it becomes a wait and see. And if they do decide that they love your talk or your idea, then what will probably happen is they'll invite you for an audition, and then you'll get to go to audition. It might be 5 minutes, present your idea to give them a feel for whether or not you can deliver it from the stage, and then cross your fingers, and hopefully you are super successful with your TEDx talk. What I will say as well, if I add one more thing, is it never hurts to make connections. So go and once you've gotten accustomed to and research the website, maybe go and follow them on Facebook, meaning the event, follow it on Twitter, follow it on LinkedIn, and share some of their posts and share some of the previous TEDx talks that they've had speakers deliver for them. So really, in a nutshell, this is how you go about securing a TEDx talk. I'd love to tell you it's a whole lot more sexy than that. Again, we have kind of created a system to allow us to systemize it a bit and increase our odds. But in terms of being able to share this today in like a 45-minute webinar, that should get you started. And that's really the process for somebody who hasn't tried the route before. And again, some maybe unique ideas in there in terms of giving value by sharing stuff from their various social media sites and commenting on things and getting to know the organizers, and at the same time making sure that you're submitting something, even like I say, surveying people and seeing if it is unique but also universal. So I'm going to take time for Q&A at the end, but before I go there, I want to move on to the next area, which is now the idea of delivering a world-class TEDx talk. And the cool part about this is even if you're sort of biding your time to deliver your TEDx talk, even if you're not there yet, even if you're waiting, even if you don't know if it's going to be approved, but you want to get out speaking, and I'll say, don't get me started. I could go on and on about all the benefits of being a professional speaker in terms of how it makes you a better influencer, how it allows you to build a tribe, how it allows you to earn a nice income from the stage, how it allows you to influence other people and build strong relationships and become the go-to expert and explode your business. Even if you're using speaking to leverage your business and share the idea about your business. So if any of those are your goals and you want to be a speaker, even in addition to delivering a TEDx talk, what I'm going to share with you, these 3 ideas for delivering a world-class TEDx talk, in my experience, applies to delivering a world-class talk regardless where you're delivering it, what stage you're delivering it on, for what audience. It'll work in my experience in almost every case. So the first, I'm going to deliver, like I say, 3 strategies for delivering a world-class talk, whether it's a TEDx talk or a talk in general. And I've been using this for 15 years as a paid speaker, and I've also worked with other people to help them with these 3 strategies. So the first one is basically what I want you to know is content is king, but emotional connection is queen. So you've heard probably that line, content is king, and that relates to social media. Content is everything in a large way. People probably aren't going to share stuff if they don't like your content. They're not going to come back and see you if they don't like your content. So content is crucial, and that's why they say content is king. But people sometimes forget the emotional connection. So you can, if you look at social media, you can share the greatest things in the world, but if you don't connect emotionally with your followers and your connections on social media, then a lot of them might come and look what you have, but won't get engaged with it. Much the same with an audience. If you want to deliver what I'll call a world-class speaking experience for your audience, then you need to connect emotionally with your audience. So how do you connect emotionally with your audience? Well, I told you at the beginning I was raised by a single mother. I shared that I barely graduated high school. I shared my journey as a speaker and where I started. Well, one great way to connect with people is through sharing your story and being humble enough to share your humilities, share the places where you fell, because chances are some people in the audience can relate to that. Maybe they were raised by a single parent. Maybe they had some negative experiences, or they fell down the trap, or those manholes that they didn't see coming, or they were terrified of speaking in public, or they barely graduated high school. So one way you can emotionally connect is if the people that you're speaking to understand where you're coming from and universally can connect with you or can relate to what you're saying. That's one way you can emotionally connect with your audience. Another way, which I'm going to talk about in a second, relates to telling a good story, which is another great way to emotionally connect. But yet another way is to interact with your audience. So ask them questions at the beginning, get them engaged. So, maybe that means opening up and saying, has anybody here, by show of hands, ever had this circumstance happen to them? And obviously it's great if it's a circumstance that most people have experienced, but just by getting them engaged and involved, then you are making an emotional connection. Another thing that you can do is make sure that you don't go over your time, because you won't connect on a good level if you go over time and they're wanting to get to lunch or whatever that might be. Another great way to emotionally connect with your audience is to get there before your talk starts and sort of work the room, talk to people and get to know them and get engaged with people before you even get on the stage. Another way to emotionally connect with your audience. Things I try to do to create an experience, which I believe will help you connect with your audience as well, is hand out evaluation forms, for example, so that they know you care about their feedback, and they're actually now part of the ownership of your talk delivering at the highest level. So these are some of the ways that you can emotionally connect with your audience. And the takeaway from that first strategy being put the power on content and emotional connection is to do both. You know, don't try to do one or the other. You got to have great content, but then also find a way to connect with your audience. And again, one of the ways is to share stories they can relate to, and to be open enough to share those challenges you had and those struggles you had and even those successes you had. So that's one great way to actually deliver, in my opinion, a world-class talk. A second way relates to what I've been kind of teasing towards, which is the storytelling. So if you can become a masterful storyteller, then you're going to find 9 times out of 10, you're going to keep people along for the journey. They're going to be engaged, they're going to be connected, and they're going to want to sit for your talk, and they're going to wait for the next story. So I mentioned Zig Ziglar earlier, and when we were talking to Tom about his father and all the great talks he delivered, impacting millions of people a year, one of the things that Tom said is that his father, a psychologist, watched him one time do a talk, and he said, "Did you know, Mr. Zig Ziglar, that every 7 minutes you tell another story, or you insert humor through a story?" And he said the reason that he was doing that is because attention wise these days, and it's less than 7 minutes now, but then they said it was 7 minutes on TV until it got to a commercial. So they said we had 7 minutes attention span, and that's what we were used to. So know that when you're storytelling, people love to learn through stories more than just facts and figures or bullet points on a screen. So another way to deliver a world-class talk is to tell good and solid stories. I'll probably do a webinar on this, but there's a whole webinar in storytelling. I mean, I won't try to do it justice right now, but just know with storytelling that you should have your story built around 3 points, regardless of how long it is. And that's really the central thing that we've discovered is people retain and learn well in threes. And I learned that from stand-up comedy, but we now know it in speaking as well. And then the other side is you should have a villain and a hero in your story. Somebody they can root for, or something they can root for, and something they can root against. So as Russell Brunson said in his new book, which I thought I had in front of me, but I don't, Expert Secrets, I believe it is, he says, help them throw rocks at their enemies. So, you know, the enemy could be time, you know, never have enough time. The enemy could be all the things pulling at their attention, like distractions. And the hero could be the ways that we can now manage our life that you're going to share with them. So have a hero and a villain, and have 3 solid points. That's, you know, the biggest takeaways I can give you about storytelling in, you know, such a short amount of time. You know, I will tell you if we release the webinar and you're on my newsletter tribe, then you'll know if we do, but release a webinar on storytelling, that could take us a full hour. But just know that storytelling is that crucial when it comes to delivering a world-class talk. And if you want to get good at storytelling, go to, I mentioned Toastmasters or whatever's in your area, Rotary, but go to a place where you get to learn a little bit about stories and watch your favorite stories, whether it's movies or whether it's somebody telling a story, and notice what really works well and what doesn't work as well. Another hint is there's a great book called The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs by Carmine Gallos. So pick up that book and it'll teach you an immense amount about how Steve Jobs used storytelling to become such a world-class presenter. I'm also right now, I just picked it up. I haven't even looked at it yet. See if I can bring it into the screen here. Hopefully you can see that. But it's the TED Talks book, and I haven't read it, so I can't say for sure. But I'm pretty sure it probably goes into the power of storytelling. I'll also say as well, watch TEDx talks and see who's telling a story and why it's working and why it doesn't. So study at the feet of giants, as they say. So that's in the storytelling side. So that's the second tip I'll give you for delivering a world-class talk, is to make sure you're using stories and using them well. And then the third one, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I want to share it again. And I mentioned Zig Ziglar practiced 3 hours before each presentation. I mentioned that I also shared that the comic that I interviewed told me that the thing that he wished people knew about comedy, and most people don't know, is how much work goes into it to make it look like no work at all has gone into it. And so this third step is to practice, 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 and then practice some more. So whether you're going to deliver a TEDx talk or whether you're going to deliver your first talk, once you've decided what the talk is, you need to practice inside and out. You need to get really good at crafting your message and sharing your message and making sure it resonates. And then on the time a story doesn't resonate, see why it doesn't. Study that. Figure out why it's not working. Maybe film yourself during your talk. That'll give you some material to use for video if you're wanting to become a speaker, but it'll also allow you to figure out what went well in your talk and what you could change. As comics, we used to film ourselves. Even if we had a 5-minute set that we prepared for 20 hours that week, we would film it and then we'd go back and study that for another 10 hours. So practice, practice, practice. As my buddy, as I said, Mark Littell, the comic said, practice so much that it makes it seem like no work at all has gone into your talk. And again, that's going to be ever so important with a TEDx talk, because for the most part, and in most cases, they're not going to edit your video. So if you deliver your TEDx talk and you run into some hiccups, that's probably either how it's going to get shared or maybe it won't get shared. So make sure you practice. Even if you want to wing it on some other talks, some shorter talks that you have, as long as you know the base material, make sure to practice your TEDx talk really well. And then what I will say is, no matter what, at least have a good understanding of the base material you're going to deliver when you're delivering a presentation. And after you've done a lot of presentations, that'll allow you to get good at winging it. So those are your 3 strategies for delivering a world-class talk. So how to secure a talk, I talked earlier. I'll go through them right now. Locate TEDx talks in your area, visit and research their website, determine their theme if possible, and check out the previous speakers. Submit a talk that's universal enough to appeal to most people, but unique enough that they want that talk there, and then wait and follow up. And then go to the audition if you have to. And then for delivering a world-class TEDx talk, the 3 strategies, remember that content and emotional connection are crucial. Remember that storytelling is very important. And remember the importance of practice, 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 and then again, practicing some more. So with that said, that's the main thing I want to cover today. What I will tell you before I open this up to any questions that you guys may have is, if you want to keep this rolling, we also, this is perfect timing. So we also just open up the doors to our free video training before we launch our paid speaking program. So I always say to people, take advantage of it while it's free. So if you're so inclined, go visit us at thespeakingprogram.com, just at your convenience, but thespeakingprogram.com. And you can go to that page and then get access from there to our free video training. We just actually released the first free video today in the series, and we're going to have 4 videos. This one here, we address the spider method, which is a unique way for creating your first talk or any talk you want to create, and I think you'll love it. And then also we talk about a strategy to help you get bookings, so leads and evaluation, bookings and testimonials, and also get people for your newsletter list, all from that very first talk. So feel free to go check it out. Again, thespeakingprogram.com. And then once you're joined up to our tribe, which some of you probably already are, then you'll know when video 2 drops, video 3, and video 4, and even when we open the doors to the full program. And I think I'll probably try to do a couple of Facebook Lives, so go and check me out on Facebook, and then also maybe another webinar before we open the doors to the program as well. Who knows, maybe it'll be on storytelling. So with that, and I know I go at a heavy pace, and that's why I said if you need PowerPoint later or you have any questions for me after the fact, reach out. I'm a fast speaker because I'm a passionate speaker. And you know what I will say is too about speaking, don't try to change the authentic you as a speaker if it's working. So for a while I thought I was going to change my speaking approach and slow rate down and be more monotone and more deliberate. But when I ask people on evaluation forums why they keep bringing me back in, they said, we love your energy, we love your passion, we love your pacing. And so that was like 99 out of 100 said that. So it's probably a good thing I didn't make the change. So I guess the takeaway from that is be authentic, and when you get feedback, always make sure you validate the feedback to make sure it's not just one person. So that being said, before we close things off for the evening, do we have any questions that you guys would like to ask me? This is the big chance. Ask any questions you may have. I'm more than happy to take the time to answer them. If you have any questions about delivering a TEDx talk, if you have any questions about resources, if you have any questions about delivering a talk in general, feel free to fire away. You know, I'll give you a minute or 2 to do so. And I'll take a drink of water while I give you a second to type it if you have any questions. But if you do, feel free to ask me any questions. And then otherwise, like I said, after the fact, you can certainly ask them as well. So I see that Sandra has a question. I'm going to take a sip of water, and then Sandra, I'll answer the question for you. So Sandra, I guess you're probably commenting on what I just shared. Sandra said, I was told by my judge/mentor that I may talk too fast, but that they will give me training if I get the TEDx talk. And then you mentioned, but you're enthusiastic too, and don't want to not be you. And so, Sandra, what I'll say to that is, so a couple of things. I slowed down ever so slightly. You can watch my the TEDx talk. I think you watched it when you first came to the page here. You can probably notice that I slowed down and I was a little more deliberate. If you watch my first TEDx talk, the 5 weeds, you'll notice that I was more deliberate. So a little slower than I am right now. So I'm a little faster tonight, pace-wise. But you'll also notice that I didn't change a whole lot from who I am. I literally just slowed it down a bit, but it's still got the essence of me. And so what I will say is they'll probably want, or sorry, I'll correct that. They may want you to slow down slightly. I would hope and think that they would let you know that if they loved your content, they wanted you to be speaking there, that they'll work with you. And they'll let you know if you have to slow your pacing down ever so slightly. But my hope is that they'll find that happy medium, and you can find that happy medium where you're still can be you. And like I said, I've been able to get by fairly well without changing my pacing too much. I've been able to get the bookings without, I don't know of a booking that I lost because of my pace, whether it was somebody booking me from a talk they just see me at, or somebody who had booked me and then brings me back in the future. Even if I had 1 out of 100 say that on a form, I will say that I don't think it's impacted many bookings in the future. And I would say it's actually helped me get bookings because people like the pacing. If you watch Tony Robbins, if you watch a Jim Rohn back in the day, some of the speakers that I guess we'll say that I had watched and sort of learned from, very fast speakers. Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, who's becoming, he's crushing it now as a speaker. And I think we can agree, if you've seen Gary's talks, he's not that slow of a speaker. He's quite fast as a speaker. So what I'll say, Sandra, is I'm sure, yeah, Tony is fast, absolutely. I'm sure with the TEDx talk, they would let you know if they want you to slow your pacing. I would hope they will work with you. And at the same time, I agree with you in not wanting to lose too much of you. And I think the enthusiasm comes through from passion. What I try to do, though, and this might help a little bit too, what I try to do to slow my own pacing down and be more deliberate and take better pauses is I actually immersed myself in TEDx talks each time before I started preparing for the upcoming one. And that way I could see kind of the general pace of some of my favorite TEDx talks. And then by getting that pace and even sort of practicing right after I watched their talks, it allowed me to maybe adjust my tone and speed and pacing a little more to those speakers. And what I also do is if I'm going to, let's say, an audience that I'm speaking to where maybe it's an elderly group, and they can't, maybe they can't hear as well as a younger group, then same idea. I accordingly will adjust my pacing. But for the most part, this is me. So yeah, Sandra, like I said, I hopefully that answered it. Maybe gave you a couple of ideas for how you can work on the pacing side, but at the same time, not lose who you are. So any other questions before we close things off for the evening? And thank you guys so much, by the way, for being here. This has been fantastic. We're going to, of course, share the replay, and a lot of people tend to tune in on the replays. And so, what I will say is you guys, and Sandra, with your questions, it helps that. It helps the people in the replays as well. So thank you for asking those questions. Are there many times in the talk when you are meant to pause? So I guess my answer would be this. Usually the idea is when you want to create suspense or anticipation, or you want to deliver a powerful message, the idea is to pause before you deliver it. If I go back to my stand-up world, we would pause before we deliver the punchline sometimes to add oomph sort of to the whatever the material or to the talk. So it's just like in comedy when people drop an F-bomb. And they do it for the right reasons. They're swearing for the right reasons. So it's just to enhance the joke, not to be replacing jokes. You'll find that they drop the F-bomb maybe with a bigger pause, or they hit it a lot harder, if you will. And that's to create, like I say, drama or intensity or what have you. So what I would say is, yeah, there's times in a talk when you should pause and you'll want to pause. And so it might be when you want them to hang on to your words or follow you along with your words. But really in the talk, after you've been delivering talks for a while, you'll start to see where are the moments that people really resonate with, and then you'll want to pause before those moments. Now, that wasn't a, that was to show you a pause, but it wasn't there wasn't really, that wasn't a pause for those moments as really a suspenseful area or anything like that. But again, you'll want to do some deliberate pauses, and usually there are areas where you're wanting to create suspense, or you're wanting to keep people with you, or you feel like people are, maybe you're losing them or what have you. So there's definitely deliberate great ways to use pausing and pauses. And what I will say is, again, learn from the giants. Study at the feet of giants. Today we're luckier than ever before because we have access to so much online training and content. So study some of the greatest speakers and see where and why they pause. Again, go to the TED website and see why certain people pause, and see and pay attention to where they pause. And I think, Sandra, you'll get a good feel for why people pause when they do, and when the times are that we're meant to pause and maybe not meant to pause. Hopefully that'll give you a good feel for it. But if you watch the masterful speakers, and especially the ones that are very deliberate in their talks, then you'll see where and when they pause, and probably be able to get a feel for why they paused as well. So hopefully that answered the question, Sandra. And so, Bismita, I guess the question is there any way to check if the audience is following you or not? So I think what you're meaning is if they're engaged with you, if they're along for the ride, if they're listening to you. I'll give you a true way to tell if they're not is if they start yawning or rolling their eyes or falling asleep. That's the true way to tell if they're not with you. If they're with you or not, ask them questions to get them engaged and get them shaking their head yes. So, or know when you say stuff that's universal, and take that dramatic pause and make sure it's resonating with them. So like I mentioned, I was raised by a single mother, and you might say, I don't know how many people here were raised by a single parent. I was raised by a single mother, and let me tell you what I learned by that experience. Can you relate to this? And then so what happens is you're getting them shaking their head, and you're be able to make eye contact and seeing if they're shaking their head, and that'll tell you if they're following you and if they're with you. If they're shaking their head and nodding, that's an agreement. Usually that means they're along with you. If you notice, and you can examine their eyes and look at their eyes and see if they're with you as well, you'll notice if they're maybe looking confused, or and if you notice multiple people are, then you maybe decide if you have enough time, and it's not maybe a 20-minute or 45-minute keynote where you don't have time for this, but if you have time, maybe you say, I'd love to take any questions now. And then, or is there anything I'm leaving off the table that I'm confusing people with? If you see that a lot of faces are confused, and that's a way to check, are they with you? But if you don't have that opportunity, again, ask a couple of questions. Maybe do a clarification ask to see if they're along with you, and if they're nodding their head, then they're probably along with you, and they're probably in there with you and following you. And then you can also see, maybe if you're a walker like I am on the stage, as you pace and walk, you'll be able to see if they're following you, and if they're, again, going along for the ride, if they're actually into this, and if they're, again, not yawning, and if they're engaged, and if they're watching you. So I would just really say to judge by observations of their facial reactions and what seems to be going on. And so hopefully that answered the question. And Sandra, your question, is there anything else I can do to get the TED talk I have auditioned for? And you had said you did the video pitch, the bio, 100 words, and live 5-minute audition already. So if you've even done the live audition, really, Sandra, what I would say is one of two things. One, follow up and see where it's at, as long as you haven't followed up too many times already. So I always say it's good to be persistent, but patiently persistent. You don't want to cross that line where they're like, we can't take this person in because they're bothering me, or they're reaching out too much, or asking too many questions. So what I would say is, it depends how much you followed up already, but follow up if you haven't heard from them in a while. But if you got to that stage, that means they're certainly interested in you. If they've taken you to the audition, you're in the running. You're obviously shortlisted. So you've gone to that set and scheduled. And I see you said followed up once with my mentor judge. And so what I would say, and I'll leave this to you to decide this, because I don't want to, certainly, if you're close and maybe they're close to deciding on you, I don't want to say anything that'll maybe steer them in the wrong direction. But what I might do is I might take in a creative follow-up next time around, like a creative approach. I'll give you, for instance, we reached out about a radio show that we thought I'd be a good fit for, or actually a podcast. And when they came back, they asked if I had read the book, which their podcast was based on. And I had indeed read the book, but I wanted to have a creative way to answer that question. So what I did when I followed back up, this was through my assistant actually, but when we followed back up, she asked me if I read the book. I was just about to hit the road to go speaking. And so what I did was I went and did a talk. I delivered a talk, in a different city, brought the book with me, and I got everybody at the talk to stand behind me and hold up the one finger, and I did the same, and it relates to the name of the book, and I held up a copy of the book, and we took a group picture of me holding up the book, and then we sent that back and talked about what I loved about the book and how what I talk about relates to the book. And so it was perhaps a creative way to follow up with the group. And the good news is I can tell you it's a top, I think it's probably a top 20 business show regularly on iTunes that have 375,000 shows, and the interview is scheduled actually for next week. And the follow-up I did with that picture was only like less than 2 weeks ago. And that's a pretty quick turnaround for a top show to get on. So what I'm getting at there, Sandra, is if you can find a creative way to follow up that they'll find entertaining and enjoyable, but it won't bother them, that might be an option for your next follow-up. But again, if the mentor and judge is actually going back and forth between the TED conference organizer and they're not the organizer, then you may want to ask them is, what do you think of this creative way to follow up? And or if the judge is actually the person that's booking the speakers, then maybe you can take a creative approach. But again, I'll leave that for you to decide, because I don't want, I mean, people are so different, meaning the person you're approaching, that might bother them or they might love that. I was willing to take a chance on that podcast and said, you know what, I don't have a whole lot to lose, but where your TEDx talk or your TEDx talk or TED talk is, I believe, nearby, as you mentioned, and it might be the key one for you to speak at, and maybe they're close to picking you already, it might be good to leave it where it's at, especially if your mentor and judge said they're just still in the deciding mode. So I'll leave that to you to decide, but that's, I guess, an answer, but at the same time, also take back on my end to say you also have to kind of read the situation. So hopefully that helped as well. And so I'm not sure if we're all good for questions, then maybe I'll close things off. Oh, it is Bristol, the biggest TEDx talk in the UK. So yeah, you may not want to risk that. I'll leave that again to you to decide, Sandra, because I don't want to say something that might push it in the wrong direction. Like I said, for me, I took similar approaches, but yeah, I would say if they're that close and it's the biggest one, then it may be worth just waiting it out. And you know, the process sometimes isn't quick. I can tell you, one of my TEDx talks, I thought it was long done. I didn't even think I had a chance. And meaning it was such a long time, even though I thought it was shortlisted. And then when I heard about it, it was like 8 months later. So you just never know. So that said, everybody, thanks so much, and I really appreciate the time you guys took tonight to be on the call or be on the webinar, and I hope you guys took some great stuff you can use. And thanks so much for spending time with me, asking questions, being engaged yourselves as well. We're going to share this out. Thank you, Sandra. We're going to share this out as a replay as well. And thank you, Bismita. And we're going to share this out, and so hopefully other people will be able to jump on this, and maybe we can try to help them make some magic happen as well. And once again, if you think the speaking trade might be for you, getting paid to be a speaker might be for you. Awesome. So I shared there. Oh, yeah, my pleasure. And then, yeah, so the other thing I guess I shared as well is feel free to go to thespeakingprogram.com if you're so inclined, and you can check out the free videos actually starting earlier today. So thank you guys again so much. You give me a purpose, and have a fantastic rest of your evening. Signing off for now.